This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, planning the dress I'd wear to marry the man of my dreams. But then, a betrayal so deep it threatened to ruin everything happened, leaving me heartbroken and questioning if I was the ITA. You won't believe the lengths some people will go to. I, 28F, have been planning my wedding to my fiancé Jake, 30M, for the past year. We got engaged in March 2023, and our wedding is set for October 2024. I've been dreaming of this day since I was a little girl, and like many brides, the dress was the most important element to me. My friend Sarah, 27F, and I have been close since college, or so I thought. She was one of the first people I told about my engagement, and naturally, she was going to be one of my bridesmaids. Sarah got engaged to her boyfriend Marcus, 29M, about 6 months after me, with their wedding planned for February 2025. I need to give you some context about why this dress meant everything to me. My grandmother passed away when I was 16, but before she died, she gave me her vintage pearl and crystal beading from her own 1952 wedding dress. The dress itself had been destroyed in a house fire in the 80s, but she had saved the beadwork in a small jewelry box. She made me promise that when I got married, I would incorporate these into my own dress somehow. It was our special secret, something that connected me to her memory and our family history. When I got engaged, I immediately knew I wanted to create something completely unique around my grandmother's beading. I'm talking about a dress that had never been seen before, not just off the rack or even a simple custom modification. I spent months researching and developing my concept. Here's what made my dress idea so specific and unique. The vision. A dramatic off-the-shoulder design with detachable long sleeves, so I could have 2 looks, ceremony and reception. Hand-sewn vintage pearl and crystal beading from my grandmother's dress incorporated into a sweeping pattern across the bodice. A unique, waterfall bustle system that would transform the train into cascading layers for dancing. Champagne-colored silk with ivory French lace overlay, not the typical white or off-white. Most uniquely, a hidden blue ribbon sewn into the train with our wedding date and my grandmother's initials embroidered in gold thread, something blue and something old. But here's what made it really special: the artistic inspiration. I had created an entire mood board based on Gustav Klimt's The Kiss painting. The beading pattern would mirror the golden swirls from the artwork, and the champagne and ivory colors were pulled directly from the painting's palette. I had even found a small, family-owned atelier in my city run by an elderly seamstress named Maria, who specialized in reproducing historical techniques and was excited to work with vintage materials. I had sketches, fabric samples, photos of my grandmother's beading, screenshots of inspiration images, and a 40-page Pinterest board I'd been curating for months. This wasn't just a dress, it was a wearable piece of art that told my family story. In July 2023, about 4 months into my planning, I was bursting with excitement about my vision. Sarah and I were having one of our regular coffee dates, and she seemed genuinely interested in my wedding planning. She kept asking questions, taking notes on her phone, to help me remember ideas for when she started planning. I showed her everything, and I mean everything. My Pinterest boards, the sketches I'd drawn, photos of my grandmother's beading, fabric swatches, even pictures of Maria's atelier. I explained the Klimt inspiration, the significance of every single detail, the technical challenges of the bustle system, the way the beading would catch light during our evening ceremony. Sarah was so supportive and enthusiastic. She kept saying things like, "Oh my God, this is so you, and I've never seen anything like this. You're going to look like a princess." She asked if she could take some photos of my sketches to show Marcus how creative you are. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. She was asking very specific technical questions that seemed odd for someone just being supportive. Things like, "What's the exact name of that lace technique? And could you send me the link to that beading supplier?" At the time, I thought she was just being a good friend, maybe thinking about her own future wedding. I also shared my timeline with her. I had booked Maria for fittings starting in March 2024, with completion planned for September 2024. The long timeline was necessary because of the intricate handwork involved. Sharing this vision felt like opening my heart completely. This dress represented not just my wedding day, but my connection to my grandmother, my artistic sensibilities, and my dreams of having something that was uniquely, authentically me. I had never felt more creatively fulfilled or emotionally invested in anything. Sarah was one of only 3 people who knew the complete vision, my mom and maid of honor Emma being the other 2. I had specifically asked all of them to keep the details private because I wanted the dress to be a surprise for Jake and our families. The trust one placed in Sarah that day was absolute. She wasn't just my bridesmaid, she was my confidant, my creative sounding board, and someone I thought would protect something so precious to me. About 2 months after our coffee date, I noticed something weird on Sarah's Instagram. She had posted a story with a bunch of wedding inspiration images. Most of them were typical: white flowers, elegant venues, classic dresses. But one image made my stomach drop. It was a detailed shot of vintage beading that looked almost identical to my grandmother's. The caption said, "Obsessed with vintage details, sparkles, #wedding planning, #vintage bride." I screenshot it immediately and stared at it for probably 20 minutes. The beading wasn't exactly the same, but it was so similar: the same pearl and crystal combination, the same technique, the same age. I told myself I was being paranoid. Vintage beading isn't that uncommon, right? But then I remembered how specifically she had asked about my beading supplier. Once I started paying attention, I couldn't unsee the patterns. Sarah's wedding Pinterest board, which I could see because we followed each other, started filling up with images that felt uncomfortably familiar. Champagne and ivory color palettes. She had previously told me she wanted classic white. Off-shoulder dress designs. She had always said she preferred strapless. Gustave Klimt artwork and Art Nouveau wedding inspiration boards. Photos of the exact French lace technique I had researched. The most damning evidence came in late November. Sarah posted an Instagram story from a coffee shop, and in the background of her selfie, I could see she had a notebook open. I zoomed in on the screenshot and could clearly make out what looked like dress sketches. The silhouette was unmistakably similar to mine: the off-shoulder design, the train, even what looked like notes about a waterfall bustle. I started feeling sick to my stomach. But I still didn't want to believe my best friend would do this to me. The confirmation, December 2023. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. My cousin Jess lives in the same neighborhood as Sarah and had mentioned casually that she'd seen Sarah coming out of some fancy bridal shop a few times. Out of curiosity and growing suspicion, I asked Jess if she could remember which shop. She said it was a small place with a foreign name, and then described the exact location of Maria's atelier. My heart stopped. Maria had mentioned she was working with another bride on a vintage-inspired piece, but obviously couldn't share details. The timing made perfect sense. Sarah would have contacted Maria shortly after our coffee date in July. I needed to know for sure, so I did something I'm not proud of. I asked Emma to casually bring up wedding dresses next time she saw Sarah, just to see what she'd say. Emma reported back that Sarah had gone on and on about her unique vision for a champagne-colored dress with vintage family beading and artistic inspiration from famous paintings. When Emma asked which painting, Sarah had gotten vague and changed the subject. At that point, I knew, but I still couldn't believe the scope of what she was doing. The final piece, January 2024. The final confirmation came when I saw Sarah at our mutual friend's birthday party in January. She was talking to a group of people about her wedding plans, and I overheard her describing her dress. "It's going to be this amazing champagne color with ivory lace overlay, and I'm using vintage beading for my great-grandmother's dress," she said. "The whole thing is inspired by this beautiful Gustave Klimt painting. I'm sure you know the one with all the gold swirls?" I felt like I was going to throw up. Not only had she stolen my entire concept, but she had even created a fictional backstory about her own great-grandmother's beading. Sarah's great-grandmother died when her grandmother was 5. There was no way she had a wedding dress or beading from her. The worst part? People were praising her for being so creative and original. I left the party early, went home, and cried for hours. The investigation deepens. Building the case, January-February 2024. I couldn't let this go, but I also couldn't confront Sarah without being absolutely certain. So I started documenting everything. I went through months of our text conversations, Instagram interactions, and Pinterest activity. The timeline was damning. Before July 2023, Sarah's wedding inspiration was completely different. Classic white dresses, traditional designs, beach wedding vibes. After July 2023, gradual shift to champagne colors, vintage elements, artistic inspirations. September 2023 onwards, direct copying of specific elements I had shown her. I also discovered that Sarah had been asking other people in our friend group about my wedding plans. Emma told me that Sarah had specifically asked her about my dress, trying to get more details. When Emma said she didn't know much, Sarah had pressed her. But did you see her sketches? What did the beading look like? Most disturbing of all, I found out that Sarah had contacted Maria's atelier just 2 weeks after our coffee date in July. Maria confirmed this when I asked directly. I told her I was concerned about timing conflicts. Sarah had specifically requested to work with Maria on a vintage beading project and had brought in photos of beading that Maria described as very similar to another client's family pieces. Maria, bless her heart, had found it odd that two clients would have such similar visions and family heirlooms, but she's a professional and hadn't said anything. As I pieced everything together, I realized Sarah hadn't just copied my dress concept. She had systematically appropriated my entire wedding aesthetic vision. The dress, nearly identical design, color palette, beading style, construction techniques. The story, fake family heirloom narrative to explain the vintage elements. The inspiration, Gustav Klimt artwork and Art Nouveau themes. The vendor, specifically sought-out MY seamstress. The timeline, planned her fittings to be completed before mine, so hers would be first. She had even adopted some of my specific wedding planning terminology and phrases that I had used when describing my vision. By February 2024, I was a mess. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, but I was consumed by anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of violation. My unique vision, the thing I had spent months creating that connected me to my grandmother's memory, that was supposed to be my once-in-a-lifetime moment, had been stolen and cheapened. Worse, Sarah was getting married 4 months before me. She would walk down the aisle in my dress first, and everyone would think I had copied her. I was having anxiety attacks about my own wedding. Jake was trying to be supportive, but he didn't understand why I couldn't just change the dress, or why this was such a big deal. My mom was furious when I told her what was happening. She had been so excited about incorporating Grandma's beading and seeing my artistic vision come to life. She said it felt like Sarah had stolen a piece of our family history. I knew I had to confront Sarah, but I wanted to do it right. I spent weeks preparing what I would say, documenting all my evidence and thinking through possible responses. I decided to approach it privately first, giving her a chance to explain or make things right before involving others. I asked her to meet me for coffee at our usual place, the same cafe where I had shared my vision with her 8 months earlier. I had prepared a whole speech, but when I saw her walk in wearing a Future Mrs. t-shirt and looking so happy and excited about her upcoming wedding, I almost lost my nerve. We did small talk for a few minutes, and then I took a deep breath and dove in. Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important. I've been noticing a lot of similarities between your wedding dress plans and the vision I shared with you last July. Her face immediately changed. She got defensive before I even finished speaking. What do you mean? My dress is completely original. I've been planning it for months. I pulled out my phone and started showing her the evidence I had compiled. The timeline of her Pinterest changes, screenshots of her Instagram stories, the fact that she had contacted Maria right after our coffee date. Sarah, you even described Gustav Klimt as your inspiration to Emma. That was MY inspiration, my mood board that I spent months creating before I ever shared it with you. She stared at the evidence for a long moment, and I watched her face cycle through several emotions, surprise, anger, and then something that looked almost like relief. Okay, she said finally. Maybe there are some similarities. But inspiration comes from everywhere, and you don't own champagne-colored dresses or vintage beading. Lots of brides use family heirlooms. But you don't have family heirlooms, I said. Your great-grandmother's beading story isn't real, Sarah. And this isn't just similar, it's identical. You copied my exact concept, down to the specific lace technique and the bustle design. What happened next was the most painful part of this entire experience. Sarah looked me straight in the eye and said, "I think you're being paranoid and possessive. Wedding planning can make people crazy, and you're seeing things that aren't there." She claimed that she had been planning her own vintage artistic vision for months before she ever talked to me, and that any similarities were just coincidence or common wedding trends. She said I was being bridezilla about something that wasn't even that unique or special. "Honestly," she said, "I'm disappointed that you would accuse me of something like this. I thought we were better friends than that." I showed her the screenshots of her Pinterest activity, with timestamps showing when she had started pinning Klimt artwork and champagne wedding dresses. "Pinterest doesn't prove anything," she said. "I could have been researching for months without pinning things publicly." When I mentioned Maria's atelier, she claimed she had found Maria through her own research, not through me. "Just because you showed me some sketches doesn't mean you own every seamstress in the city." The conversation went in circles for almost 2 hours. Every piece of evidence I presented, Sarah had an explanation for. Every feeling I expressed, she minimized or dismissed. Finally, I played my last card. I told her that Maria had confirmed the timeline and the similarity of our beading requests. Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment. She got angry, really angry. "Fine," she snapped. "Maybe I was inspired by some of your ideas. But that's how creativity works. We all inspire each other. You can't copyright a wedding dress concept. But you can acknowledge when you've taken someone else's deeply personal vision," I replied. "This isn't just about a dress, Sarah. This is about trust and friendship, and the fact that you've let me plan my wedding for months, knowing that you were going to walk down the aisle first in essentially the same dress." She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe she was finally understanding the scope of what she had done. Instead, she said, "Look, I'm sorry if you feel like I copied you, but I'm not changing my dress. I've already put deposits down, had fittings scheduled, and my wedding is in 11 months. You still have time to change yours if it's such a big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Change my dress? Sarah, this was my grandmother's beading, my family history, my months of creative work. "Then you should have trademarked it," she said coldly. I left that coffee shop feeling more betrayed than when I had arrived. Not only had Sarah stolen my vision, but she was completely unremorseful about it. She had gaslit me, minimized my feelings, and suggested that I should be the one to change my deeply personal wedding plans. That night, I called my mom and cried for hours. She was furious and wanted to call Sarah's mother. They knew each other from our college events. I asked her not to. I wasn't ready to escalate things that far. Jake was supportive but frustrated. He kept saying things like, "It's just a dress, and can't you just make yours different enough?" He didn't understand that this wasn't about the dress itself. It was about the betrayal, the violation of trust, and the theft of something that represented my deepest personal and family connections. I barely slept for weeks after that confrontation. The ripple effect. The friend group division. Word about our confrontations spread quickly through our friend group. Sarah had apparently called Emma the same night, crying about how I had attacked her and accused her of terrible things. Emma, bless her, knew the real story and was firmly on my side. But other friends were getting conflicting information and didn't know what to believe. Sarah started what I can only describe as a subtle campaign to rewrite history. She began telling people that we had inspired each other during our wedding planning process and that I was being possessive about common wedding trends. She posted on social media about dealing with wedding drama and toxic friends who try to control other people's choices. Never naming me directly, but making it clear enough that people in our circle would know what she was referring to. Some friends took her side, saying that wedding inspiration comes from everywhere and that I was being unreasonable. Others were more neutral, saying they didn't want to get involved in wedding drama. A few friends, the ones who knew me well enough to understand how deeply personal my dress concept was, were horrified by what Sarah had done. The bridal party explosion. The situation came to a head when I realized I couldn't have Sarah as my bridesmaid. The thought of her standing next to me at my wedding, after what she had done, made me feel sick. I called her in early April and told her I thought it would be better if she wasn't in the bridal party. "I still want you to come as a guest," I said, "but I can't have you standing next to me after everything that's happened." Sarah exploded. She accused me of being vindictive and punishing her for being creative. She said I was ruining our friendship over a dress and that she had done nothing wrong. "Fine," she said finally. "If that's how you want to be, maybe I won't come to your wedding at all." "That's your choice," I replied. She hung up on me. After I removed Sarah from my bridal party, she ramped up her social media campaign. She started posting passive-aggressive content about fake friends and bridezillas who think they own wedding trends. She posted a long Instagram story about how some people try to control others' wedding choices and how she was staying true to her vision despite negativity from toxic people. The worst part was when she posted photos from her dress fitting at Maria's atelier. She made sure to tag the location and post about her unique vintage family heirloom beading and her original artistic vision. I watched from my phone as people liked and commented, praising her creativity and beautiful concept, having no idea that they were looking at my stolen design. It felt like being punched in the stomach every single time. The vendor situation. Maria, the seamstress, was caught in an incredibly awkward position. She couldn't break client confidentiality, but she could see how similar our dresses were becoming. When I went in for my first fitting in April, Maria gently mentioned that she had concerns about the similarity between my dress and Sarah's. "I want to make sure you're both happy with your final dresses," she said carefully. "Maybe we could modify some elements to make each dress more distinct." I appreciated Maria's professionalism, but I was firm. This was my design concept, my family beading, and my inspiration from the beginning. "I'm not changing anything." Maria nodded and said she understood. She mentioned that she had documentation of when each client had first contacted her and what their initial requests had been, if that ever became relevant. My mom was devastated by the whole situation. She had been so excited about incorporating my grandmother's beading and seeing my artistic vision come to life. She felt like Sarah had stolen a piece of our family history. My dad, who usually stays out of wedding planning, was furious when he learned what had happened. He said Sarah's behavior was unconscionable and that she was no longer welcome in our home. Jake's family was confused by the whole situation. They didn't understand why I couldn't just change the dress design to be different from Sarah's. They thought I was being stubborn and making things harder than they needed to be. This lack of understanding from Jake's family put additional strain on our relationship during what was supposed to be a happy time. By May 2024, 5 months before my wedding, I was an emotional wreck. What should have been the happiest period of my life had become consumed by anger, betrayal, and stress. I was having regular anxiety attacks about my wedding. Every time I looked at my dress sketches or went for fittings, I thought about Sarah stealing my vision. I started having nightmares about showing up to my wedding and finding that Sarah had somehow managed to wear an identical dress as a guest. I was seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional impact of the betrayal. She helped me understand that this wasn't really about the dress. It was about trust, boundaries, and having something deeply personal violated by someone I had considered my best friend. The most frustrating part was the timeline. Sarah's wedding was in February 2025, and mine was in October 2024. But because she had started working with Maria just weeks after I shared my vision with her, her dress would be completed first. She would walk down the aisle in my dress 4 months before I did. Everyone who saw her wedding photos would think my dress was a copy of hers, not the other way around. The thought of people at my own wedding whispering about how my dress looked just like Sarah's made me feel sick. As my October wedding approached, the situation with Sarah continued to overshadow what should have been an exciting time. Sarah had indeed backed out of attending my wedding, citing scheduling conflicts, but making it clear to our mutual friends that it was really because of our disagreement about wedding planning. She continued to post subtle digs on social media about authentic brides who don't copy others and staying true to your vision despite drama. The friend group remained divided. Some people had chosen sides, others were trying to stay neutral, and the whole thing had created an uncomfortable dynamic at group events. The dress completion. In August, Maria completed my dress, and it was absolutely stunning. Despite everything that had happened, seeing my vision come to life was breathtaking. The way my grandmother's beading caught the light, the perfect drape of the champagne silk, the intricate lacework, it was everything I had dreamed of and more. Maria had done an incredible job, and for a moment, looking at myself in that dress, I forgot about Sarah and the whole terrible situation. But the joy was bittersweet. Every time I looked at the dress, I thought about how Sarah would be wearing essentially the same design in a few months, claiming it as her own original creation. In September, just weeks before my wedding, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Sarah's betrayal ruin my wedding day. I stopped checking her social media, asked my friends and family not to update me on her wedding planning. I focused on my own celebration and the man I was about to marry. Jake and I had several conversations about the whole situation. He finally seemed to understand that this wasn't really about a dress. It was about trust, creativity, and family history being stolen by someone I had considered my best friend. "I'm sorry I didn't understand before," he said. "I see now why this hurt you so much." October 12th, 2024, my wedding day. Despite everything that had happened with Sarah, my wedding day was perfect. Walking down the aisle in my grandmother's beading, wearing a dress that represented months of creative vision and family history, I felt beautiful and authentic and completely myself. Jake cried when he saw me. My parents were beaming. My actual friends, the ones who had supported me through this entire ordeal, were there celebrating with us. Several people complimented my unique and stunning dress. A few guests asked about the artistic inspiration behind the design, and I was able to share the real story of how I had developed the concept. For those few perfect hours, Sarah and her betrayal felt like ancient history. After my wedding, I posted a few photos on social media. I included a picture of me in my dress with a caption explaining the significance of my grandmother's beading and the months of planning that had gone into creating my unique artistic vision. I didn't mention Sarah directly, but I made sure to document the real timeline and inspiration behind my dress. Within hours, I had dozens of comments from people praising the creativity and personal significance of my dress design. February 14th, 2025, Sarah's wedding. I didn't attend Sarah's wedding, obviously, but I saw the photos. She had posted them all over social media, and mutual friends shared details. Her dress was indeed almost identical to mine. The champagne color, the off-shoulder design, the vintage beading pattern, even the artistic photography style that echoed the Klimt inspiration. But here's the thing, seeing those photos didn't devastate me the way I thought they would. For months after my own perfect wedding day, I felt sorry for her. Sorry that she hadn't been creative enough to develop her own vision. Sorry that she had to steal someone else's deeply personal concept instead of finding her own. Sorry that she had thrown away a close friendship for a dress design. The comments. What was interesting was the reaction to Sarah's wedding photos. Several people who had seen my wedding photos commented things like, "This looks so similar to another wedding I saw recently. Didn't someone else have this exact same dress design a few months ago? Beautiful dress, but it reminds me of another bride's look." Sarah had started responding to these comments defensively, insisting that her dress was completely original and based on family heirlooms and her unique artistic vision. But the internet never forgets, and people had screenshots. A few weeks after Sarah's wedding, Emma forwarded me a message she had received from another girl in our extended social circle. I saw Sarah's wedding photos and then went back to look at OP's photos from October. They're literally wearing the same dress design. I remember Opie posting about her grandmother's beading and the months of planning that went into her concept. Didn't Sarah see Opie's posts? It's so weird to copy someone's dress idea so exactly. Similar messages started circulating in our friend group. People were putting the timeline together and realizing what had really happened. Sarah's narrative about having an original vision was falling apart under scrutiny. Several of our mutual friends reached out to me privately to apologize for not understanding the situation initially. "I'm so sorry, I didn't realize how bad this was," one friend wrote. Seeing the photos side by side, it's clear that she completely copied your concept. That's so messed up. Another friend said, I feel terrible for suggesting you were overreacting. She literally stole your entire wedding dress vision. That's not inspiration. That's plagiarism. Even some of the friends who had initially taken Sarah's side were quietly reaching out to acknowledge that they now understood why I had been so upset. As more people started questioning the similarities between our dresses, Sarah doubled down on her story. She posted a long Instagram story about jealous people trying to diminish her special day and haters who can't accept that two people might have similar taste. She claimed that people were bullying her by suggesting her dress wasn't original. But the more she protested, the more obvious it became that she was being defensive about something she knew was wrong. A month after Sarah's wedding, I received an unexpected text message from her. Can we talk? I think we should clear the air. I was hesitant to engage, but I was also curious. Jake thought I should ignore her, but I decided to hear what she had to say. We met at a different coffee shop. I couldn't bear to go back to our old place. Sarah looked tired and stressed. She said that the wedding was over, and she wanted to move past all the drama. I'm sorry if you felt like I copied your dress ideas, she said. That wasn't my intention. I noticed, she said, if you felt, rather than acknowledging that she actually had copied me. Sarah, I said, you contacted Maria 2 weeks after I showed you my sketches. You completely changed your wedding aesthetic after our coffee date. You literally described Gustav Klimt as your inspiration after I spent months developing that concept. This wasn't accidental. She was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. Maybe I was more influenced by your ideas than I realized at the time, but I put my own spin on it. It wasn't exactly the same. It was the closest thing to an admission I was going to get. The problem isn't that you took inspiration, I said. The problem is that you took my entire concept and then lied about it. You created a fake story about your great-grandmother's beating. You let me plan my wedding for months, knowing you were going to debut my design first. You gaslit me when I confronted you about it. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I was excited about getting married, and I loved your vision so much. I don't know what I thought. I miss our friendship, Sarah continued. Can we put this behind us and move forward? I appreciate you acknowledging what happened, I said. But I don't think I can go back to being friends with someone who would do this to me. You didn't just copy a dress design. You betrayed my trust in the deepest way possible. She started crying. It was just a dress, she said. I know it was important to you, but it was just a dress. And there it was, even in her apology, she still didn't understand. It was never just about a dress. I left that coffee shop knowing that our friendship was truly over. Sarah had shown me who she really was, someone who would steal something deeply personal from a friend, lie about it, gaslight me when confronted, and then minimize the significance of her betrayal. Even her apology was more about her wanting to move past the consequences of her actions than about genuine remorse.